Tomorrow's the provincial election in Alberta, and although I'm out here in exile in Toronto, I'm an Alberta boy at heart. I've been following it very closely, reading the four main daily newspapers in that province, the Edmonton Sun and Edmonton Journal, the Calgary Sun and the Calgary Herald. In fact, over the course of my life, I have written things in all four of those newspapers. I know a lot of the people who work there, and I have to say, over the course of the last 30 days, I have not seen any reporters or any columnists indicate in any way that they were supportive of Jim Prentice and the PCs. In fact, it's been uniformly the opposite. The entire political pundit class, reporters, observers, longtime people, and I'm not just talking anti-conservatives, even people who are ideologically conservative, it's unanimous. The PCs are so gross, so long in the tooth, so in need of being replaced that even conservatives like myself, I suppose, no, they just have to be thrown out. There is a rage in Alberta, a fury, not just because of the left-wing budget brought in by Jim Prentice, but because of the anti-democratic sneaky deal he did trying to dissolve the opposition that Danielle Smith, to her great discredit, agreed to do. So there's all these reasons, democratic reasons, financial reasons, basic cronyism and corruption. What I'm saying is not a single journalist in those four key newspapers supports Jim Prentice, and for 30 days they've made that clear. And then yesterday, all four of those newspapers, or actually both Sun newspapers yesterday, and the Edmonton Journal and the Calgary Herald a day or so before, all four of them endorsed Jim Prentice using the word we. We endorse Jim Prentice. We endorse the PCs. Well, hang on. That just can't be true, because I know from reading the past month that not a single one of those reporters or columnists does endorse Jim Prentice. So who wrote these? Were these actually written in Calgary or Edmonton? Well, yesterday I did a very simple test. I took the Edmonton Sun endorsement, I took the Calgary Sun endorsement, and I read them next to each other, and they were word for word identical. So they could not have been written locally because they were repeating some memo, some edict. How can you say we in two different cities for the same endorsement? Obviously, they were ordered to, they were forced to. In fact, Paula Simons, one of the columnists of the Edmonton Journal, went on Twitter and said, "This is shocking. We were not going to endorse. I was told we were not going to. This is an ambush." You can see some of her Twitter tweets here. She basically blew the whistle on her own newspaper, saying this was not a local decision. Well, if it wasn't a local decision, whose was it? Well, as you may know, in the recent weeks, Post Media, which owns the Edmonton Journal and Calgary Herald, bought Sun Media, which owns the Edmonton Sun and the Calgary Sun. And it is a habit of the new owners to command local newspapers to talk like a puppet and say whatever the bosses in Toronto say. This was clearly a written in Toronto endorsement. Now, the other day, the Globe and Mail issued their endorsement of Jim Prentice too, and I think if anyone in Alberta even read the Globe and Mail, which I'm not sure how many do, they would have laughed at it. They would have said, "Hey, thanks guys from Toronto for your very much thoughtful view on who should run us out here, but we're an independent province now and we can make up our own mind." It would be about as laughable as if a newspaper in Quebec City endorsed one leader or the other in Alberta. I mean, no one would even know, let alone care. And that's the thing about the Globe's endorsement. It was signed by the Globe, written in Toronto, so no one even pretended to care. But what was so deceitful about these four lockstep endorsements of Jim Prentice that ran in Calgary and Edmonton is that they passed themselves off as the honest view of the local reporters and editorial boards. We know that's not true. Paula Simons told us that's not true. I put it to you that some of the things in those endorsements, not a single writer, let alone a janitor in the Calgary Edmonton Sun believe. I wanted to take you through just a few lines in the endorsements that ran word for word in the Calgary and Edmonton Suns yesterday. If you know anything about the Sun newspapers, and I do, having worked there on and off for 20 years, you'll know that no one in that company wrote these lines. For example, they say, this is the endorsement by we, the Edmonton Sun, and we, the Calgary Sun, obviously written in Toronto. Here, let me quote to you. "We fear a hard turn right to the Wild Rose will result in merciless cuts and public service job loss." Do you actually think anyone who works for the Sun newspapers would call a Conservative Party hard right and use the word fear. We fear the hard right wild rose, that they would say that rolling back the public sector unions to be equal to other provinces is a merciless cut. Do you actually believe any person in the Sun newspaper chain would write that? If so, I'll pay you a $100 bounty. Get me that person's name. They'll get a job with the Toronto Star, but I'm sure they're not writing for the Sun. Here, I just want to read one more line. Prentice has proven to be a man of high integrity and vision. Come on now. Other than his close personal family and those who are paid to support him, is there a single Albertan who would say that? Is there an Albertan at the Sun who would say that after the Sun so excoriated Prentice for his dirty, sneaky deal to dissolve the official opposition? Of course not. This was not a real endorsement. Now, I don't mind the new Toronto owners of these newspapers saying whatever they want. They can endorse the Bloc Québécois for all I like. That's part of property rights. If you own a newspaper, you can endorse the man in the moon. But sign it. Put your name to it. Don't pass it off as the local views. All you're doing is renting out their goodwill. These great writers in Calgary and Edmonton who for weeks and months and years have built up a reputation as thoughtful people, by passing off these editorials by using the word we, you're putting it on them. It's not true. These editorials are a disgrace, an embarrassment. I don't think they'll convince a single Albertan. What they will do is lower the reputation of the Calgary Sun and Edmonton Sun and the Journal and the Herald. Because after all, if Toronto will now interfere with endorsements to scratch someone's back politically, what other stories will they interfere with? If the publishers and reporters and editorial boards of these 4 Alberta papers can now be told what to do by Toronto, what are the limits? What other stories have been altered, edited, or cut that we don't know about? Maybe Paula Simons can tell us if she hasn't been sacked by her bosses today. And by the way, I think she's a great journalist. You know, this reminds me of something that happened in 1997 when I was a 25-year-old journalist for the Calgary Sun. Back then, the Sun's motto was loyal to Calgary. And that was when the Reform Party was making a big breakthrough. And yet, the paper that was in the same city as the Reform Party was headquartered, where the leader of that party was headquartered, where that city went overwhelmingly for the Reform Party, that paper was ordered by Toronto to endorse the Quebecer Jean Charest, while their motto was loyal to Calgary. I actually quit the newspaper on principle after that happened. This is happening again. Now, I emailed the new boss of Post Media, Paul Godfrey, and I asked him who actually wrote this editorial and if he can tell me about it. He hasn't written back. If he does, I'll let you know what he says. We saw a few weeks ago something similar happen at CTV, where Kevin Krull, the boss of Bell Media, instructed CTV to alter coverage of some political story for his own business reasons. When this got out, Kevin Krull, the president of Bell Media, was sacked. That's how important Bell Media treated journalistic independence. So far, no word on how Post Media values media independence, but really, who's going to report on it? The Sun? The Herald? The Journal? That's the problem. When you own all the newspapers in Alberta, you sort of own all the critics. They're silenced. When Alberta was born in 1905, it was born unequal in many ways. Constitutionally, it didn't have the same rights as the other provinces. Financially, it was a weakling. The population of it was small. It was treated really like a colony of Ontario. Since then, Alberta's grown up. It's actually economically one of the most important places in the country. It's been the engine that's kept this country going and getting out of the recession so soon. I think Post Media is treating those newspapers and those newspapers' readers like they're a colony again. For TheRebel.media, I'm Ezra Levant.